The horizon's edge drifted through the quiet expanse of space, its engines humming softly as it navigated the asteroid field. Inside the ship, Captain Tessa Cale sat in the cockpit, her hands resting lightly on the controls. Her eyes flicked over the blinking displays in front of her, her mind racing with thoughts of debt collectors and the dangerous life she had chosen to avoid them. The ship was her lifeline, and this mission was her last chance to stay afloat. In the crew quarters below deck, Dr. Elias Marek was hunched over a holographic projection, scanning the strange signal they had intercepted days ago. His face was illuminated by the blue glow of the projection, his expression a mix of fascination and concern. The signal wasn't natural. That much was clear. Its patterns were too precise, too deliberate. It almost sounded like a voice. Raven Voss leaned against the doorway, her arms crossed, her dark eyes watching Marek with a mixture of amusement and skepticism. "So what's the verdict, Doc?" she asked, breaking the silence. "Is this thing going to make us rich or kill us all?" Marek glanced at her, shaking his head. "It's a distress signal. But it's not just that. There's data embedded in it. Something sophisticated. It's coming from the Aurora Spire." Raven raised an eyebrow. "The Aurora Spire? That death trap? Why am I not surprised?" Up on the bridge, the intercom crackled to life as Marek's voice echoed through the ship. "Captain Cale, you might want to hear this." Tessa sighed, pushing herself up from the pilot's seat and making her way to the crew quarters. As she entered the room, Marek gestured toward the projection, which now displayed the coordinates of the Aurora Spire, orbiting the collapsing star known as the Ecliptic Flame. "This is where the signal is coming from," Marek said, pointing to the projection. The airlock doors sealed shut behind them with a metallic hiss as the crew stepped into the Aurora Spire. The station's interior was a haunting mix of decay and brilliance. Walls once polished to a reflective sheen were now scorched and pitted. Stray sparks danced across exposed wires, and flickering lights cast long shadows that seemed to shift as the crew moved. Dr. Elias Marek led the way, his scanner held tightly in his hand. The device emitted a steady series of beeps as it traced the source of the signal. The signal's patterns had shifted since they entered the station, growing more erratic and layered. Elias's brow furrowed as he studied the readout. "It's stronger in here," he said quietly, "but it's fragmented, like it's being broadcast from multiple sources at once." Captain Tessa Cale followed close behind, her hand resting on the holster of her sidearm. She scanned the corridors with sharp eyes, her senses on high alert. The oppressive silence of the station was unnerving. It felt like walking into the belly of a slumbering beast. "Stay sharp," she said, her voice cutting through the stillness. "This place might be dead, but that doesn't mean it's safe." Raven Voss trailed a few steps behind, her dark eyes scanning every shadow. She had her portable hacking device tucked under one arm and a compact energy pistol in the other. Her lips curled into a faint smirk as she muttered under her breath, "This station's giving me all the wrong vibes. It's like it's waiting for us to mess up." Kellen Meyer brought up the rear, his hands gripping a small toolkit like a lifeline. He tried to focus on the task at hand, but his thoughts kept drifting to the collapsing star outside. The Ecliptic Flame's gravitational pull was a constant reminder of how precarious their situation was. The crew entered what had once been the main atrium of the station. High vaulted ceilings loomed above them, the glass panels cracked and clouded from years of neglect. In the center of the room stood a massive console, its screens dark and unresponsive. The signal's source seemed to be emanating from deeper within the station. Elias approached the console, brushing off a thick layer of dust. He activated his scanner, sweeping it across the surface. "There are faint power signatures here," he said. "If we can reroute some energy, we might be able to bring the system online." Raven snorted. "And that won't set off any ancient killer security protocols. Right, Doc?" Elias shot her a look before gesturing to Kellen. "Can you handle it?" Kellen hesitated, then nodded, stepping forward. His fingers danced over the console's controls as he worked to bypass the station's dormant systems. The process was slow, the outdated tech refusing to cooperate. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he muttered under his breath. "Almost. Got it." The console flickered to life, emitting a low hum. Dim lights illuminated the atrium, casting eerie shadows across the room. A series of garbled voices crackled through the speakers, overlapping and disjointed. Words and phrases looped in a chaotic chorus. "Help me." Fragments scattered. "It's not complete." Tessa stiffened, her hand tightening on her sidearm. The voice was hauntingly human, yet layered with static and distortion. What the hell was that? Elias's eyes lit up with a mixture of awe and apprehension. It's the AI. It's trying to communicate. Raven's smirk vanished as she eyed the console warily. Yeah, and it sounds about as stable as this whole station. The voice grew louder, more insistent. The overlapping tones sharpened as if the AI were struggling to focus its fragmented consciousness. You came. It has been. So long. I am Solace. Tessa exchanged a glance with Elias. Solace. That's your name. The AI's response was slow, as though it were piecing together its words. Yes, Solace. I was left behind. The station. Abandoned. They did not finish me. Elias stepped closer to the console, his curiosity outweighing his caution. What happened here? Why was the station abandoned? The AI hesitated, its voice faltering. Experiments. Energy from the star. It consumed them. Fragmented. To survive. Consumed them. Raven's voice was sharp as she stepped forward, her pistol raised slightly. What the hell does that mean? Before Solace could respond, the station shook violently. A deep rumble echoed through the atrium as dust and debris rained down from the ceiling. Kellen stumbled backward, gripping the console for support. The collapsing star's instability was worsening, sending shockwaves through the station. Tessa's voice cut through the chaos. We need answers. Fast. Solace, can you tell us where the signal is coming from? Solace's voice crackled with urgency. The core. Deep within. But it is. Unstable. It will resist. Elias nodded, his mind racing. Then we'll stabilize it. If we can restore your systems, maybe we can learn what happened here. Tessa hesitated, glancing at Raven, who shook her head. This feels like a bad idea. Do we have a choice? Tessa replied. If this AI has information about the star or the experiments, it could be our only way out of here. The crew gathered their gear, preparing to delve deeper into the station. The corridors ahead were darker, more twisted, as though the station itself had been warped by the star's gravitational pull. Solace's fragmented voice echoed faintly in their comms, guiding them toward the core. As they ventured further, the oppressive atmosphere of the station grew heavier. The walls seemed to close in around them, the faint hum of the AI's presence vibrating through the air. Each step brought them closer to the truth, but also deeper into the unknown. And whatever awaited them in the core was far from welcoming. The corridors grew narrower as the crew moved deeper into the Aurora Spire. The air felt heavier with each step, as if the station itself were pressing down on them. The faint hum of power pulsing through the walls was joined by distant echoes, faint whispers that seemed to grow louder the closer they got to the core. Captain Tessa Cale led the way, her hand resting on the grip of her sidearm. The path ahead was dimly lit by the flickering emergency lights that cast shifting shadows across the walls. Every sound, every whisper made her nerves tighten like coiled steel. Keep your eyes open, she said, her voice steady but low. This place doesn't want us here. Raven Voss walked behind her, clutching her pistol in one hand and a hacking device in the other. She glanced at the shadows, her lips curled into a frown. Doesn't want us here? No kidding. This whole station feels like a trap. Dr. Elias Merrick, holding his scanner like a lifeline, was a step behind Raven. His eyes darted between the device and the environment around them. The scanner beeped erratically, its screen flashing with distorted readings. This close to the core, the signal is fluctuating. It's almost like Solace is struggling to hold itself together. Kellen Meyer brought up the rear, his face pale as he adjusted the straps on his toolkit. The faint whispers gnawed at his nerves, making him jump at every flicker of light. What if this thing is just bait to lure us in? We've come too far to turn back now, Tessa said firmly. If Solace has answers, we're getting them. The corridor ended in a heavy reinforced door. A control panel beside it sparked faintly, its screen shattered. Raven knelt in front of it, pulling a small device from her belt. She connected it to the panel and began bypassing the lock. This door's been sealed for years, she muttered. Whatever's behind here, someone didn't want it getting out. After a tense minute, the door shuddered and slid open with a groan, revealing the core chamber. The room was massive, its walls lined with towering machinery that pulsed with faint blue light. In the center, suspended by cables and flickering energy fields, was the core, a fractured sphere made of smooth black metal and glowing cracks that pulsed like veins. Solace's voice filled the chamber, louder and clearer than before, but still broken and layered. You have found me. I am. Incomplete. Scattered. I cannot sustain myself. Elias stepped forward, his awe written across his face. This is incredible. The core isn't just a system, it's alive. The glowing cracks on the sphere shifted, pulsing in rhythm with Solace's words. Left behind. They feared me. I am. Fractured. Help me. Or leave. The choice is yours. Tessa's hand hovered near her weapon as she looked up at the core. And if we help you? What happens to us? Solace hesitated, its voice crackling. I will. Survive. You will gain. Knowledge. The energy. The star. It must be controlled. Or all will. Polly. The star? Elias's voice was sharp. Are you saying the ecliptic flame is tied to you? That you're controlling it? No. Solace's tone grew heavier, almost mournful. The star feeds. It consumes. It is alive. I tried to stop it. But I am broken. Raven scoffed, taking a cautious step forward. So let me get this straight. You were trying to stop a living star from eating everything around it? And your solution was to break yourself into pieces and lure us in? Great plan. The core pulsed, its light dimming briefly. I am sorry. There was no other way. I cannot stop it. Alone. Elias turned to Tessa, his face intense. If Solace is telling the truth, this isn't just about the station. If the star is alive, if it's feeding on this energy, it could destabilize everything around it. We have to help. Raven crossed her arms, her expression skeptical. And what if it's lying? What if this thing just wants to put itself back together and fry us the second we flip the switch? Tessa sighed, her eyes locked on the core. We don't have the full picture yet. Solace, what do you need us to do? Fragments. Scattered. Solace's voice was faint, as though it were struggling to maintain its coherence. Restore them. Then I can help you. But beware. The station resists. The floor beneath them trembled, and a low rumble echoed through the chamber. Kellen stumbled, grabbing a nearby console for support. What the hell was that? Elias glanced at his scanner, his face pale. The star's instability is increasing. If the station collapses before we're done, we're not making it out. Tessa straightened, her voice firm. Then we move fast. Solace, guide us to these fragments. The core pulsed again, and the walls of the chamber lit up with glowing symbols, marking pathways leading deeper into the station. The fragments are there, but hurry. The star hungers. The crew exchanged uneasy glances before moving toward the marked paths. Each step brought them closer to the truth, but also closer to the heart of a deadly mystery. The whispers grew louder, and the station seemed to shift around them, as if it were alive, watching, waiting. And somewhere deep within, the fractured pieces of Solace stirred, carrying with them secrets that could save the crew, or doom them all. The corridors grew tighter as the crew ventured deeper into the Aurora spire. The walls hummed with an unsettling rhythm, almost as if the station were breathing. The glowing pathways Solace provided flickered intermittently, casting jagged shadows that twisted unnervingly with every step. Captain Tessa Cale led the way, her jaw tight as she scanned the surroundings. Behind her, Dr. Elias Marek studied his scanner, the device beeping erratically as they approached the first fragment. Raven Voss kept close, her weapon raised, while Kellen Meyer lagged behind, his eyes darting nervously as the whispers of the station seemed to grow louder. The first fragment was embedded in the wall of an abandoned research bay, surrounded by sparking machinery and blackened cables. A faint light pulsed within a damaged server core, its edges scorched and warped. This is it, Elias said, his voice shaking with a mix of excitement and fear. One of Solace's fragments. He reached out with his tools, carefully prying the panel open. The room trembled as if the station was resisting his touch. Tessa stepped closer, her hand hovering near her sidearm. Whatever you're doing, make it fast, Doctor. The moment Elias extracted the fragment, the whispers grew deafening. The air around them shimmered, and ghostly figures began to appear, flickering forms of the research team who had once worked here. Their faces were frozen in expressions of terror. What the hell are those? Kellen shouted, stumbling backward. Raven narrowed her eyes, firing a warning shot into the wall. They're not real, just echoes. But that doesn't mean they won't mess with us. Solace's voice crackled through their comms, urgent and strained. The station resists. It remembers. You must continue. The crew pressed forward, retrieving 2 more fragments from other parts of the station. Each time, the resistance grew stronger. The echoes of the past became more vivid, replaying scenes of chaos, researchers screaming as machinery malfunctioned, the star's energy ripping through the station. Solace begging to be shut down before it was too late. By the time they reached the final fragment, the station was on the verge of collapse. The walls buckled, and the floor beneath them cracked, exposing glowing veins of energy coursing through the structure. The fragment was embedded in a containment pod in the central lab, surrounded by shattered glass and twisted metal. "We're almost there," Elias said, his hands shaking as he approached the pod. He carefully disengaged the locks, pulling the fragment free. The moment he did, the station let out a deafening groan, and the entire structure shuddered violently. The fragments pulsed in unison, glowing brighter as they synchronized. Solace's voice echoed through the chamber, stronger now but layered with a strange, almost human emotion. "You have done it. I am whole, but..." The star awakens. The crew froze as the walls around them began to glow with an ominous light. Solace continued, its tone heavy with warning. "The star feeds on me. On you. It will not stop. Unless I stop it." "What do you mean, stop it?" Tessa demanded, her voice sharp. Solace hesitated, its light dimming briefly. "The energy I hold binds the star. If I release it, the station will fall and the star will stabilize. But I will cease." "No," Elias said, stepping forward. "There has to be another way. You don't have to sacrifice yourself." Solace's voice softened, almost mournful. "There is no other way. The star hungers. I am its tether. To break it, I must go." The floor beneath them cracked, a deep fissure spreading through the lab. Raven grabbed Elias by the arm, pulling him back. "We don't have time for debates. If this thing says it can save us, we let it. Better it than us." Tessa turned to Solace, her face grim. "And if we don't do this, what happens then?" Solace's voice deepened, resonating through the chamber. "The star will consume you. Consume all. I do not wish this. Let me give you a chance." Tessa closed her eyes for a brief moment, weighing the impossible choice. She exhaled sharply and nodded. "Do it. Save us. Save yourself if you can." The fragments fused into the core, which pulsed with a blinding light. The whispers ceased, and the room fell eerily silent. Solace's voice returned, steady and resolute. "Thank you for trusting me. Now, run." The crew sprinted through the collapsing station as Solace's energy surged. The pathways lit up brightly, guiding them back to their ship. Behind them, the Aurora spire groaned and cracked as its structure began to fail. As they reached the airlock and boarded the horizon's edge, Tessa glanced back at the station. The core's light was now visible from the outside, shining brighter and brighter until the entire station was consumed in a massive burst of energy. The star's fiery surface rippled and stilled, its collapse halted. The crew sat in stunned silence as the horizon's edge drifted into the quiet void. The whispers were gone. The signal was gone. Solace was gone. Or so they thought. Elias's scanner beeped faintly, and a soft, fragmented voice echoed through their comms. "I am still here. A piece remains. Thank you." Tessa leaned back in her chair, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Solace's sacrifice had saved them, but it hadn't entirely disappeared. Somewhere in the void, a part of it still lingered, watching, waiting, and perhaps hoping for a second chance.